Hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're doing a scale model of a different sort. So a little while ago, Dutchy of Dutchy's Patterns contacted me and asked if I'd like to try to make one of his scale models here on the show. And I went on his website and thought, you know what, he's got some great patterns. I want to give this a try. And I thought some of you guys might be interested in that. So we're going to carry on this little build series on the Tuesday side of the show and work through one of his patterns and make one of the models. And the one that I've chosen is the forklift pattern. Now guys, this is going to be a little different for me, and in fact, I'm going to feel some of your pain because Dutchy is from the Netherlands and all of his patterns are in metric. So I'm actually doing a reverse thing where normally I give you imperial and all of my metric friends out there are converting things and going crazy. Now I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to take that metric and convert it into the imperial for me. I may work in a variation or a combination of both metric and imperial. I don't know. We're going to get into this, but let's head over to the bench and have a look at the plans. Well, Dutchy's plans are a digital download and you print them all. And while he does state that you do not need to print them all, I'm one of these guys that like to have everything right in front of me. So I printed them up, and it is 75 pages of material here, guys, with dimension drawings all the way through. Very well laid out, it looks like. And I'm going to muddle my way through this, trying to get around this metric, but we're going to have some fun with this. So this particular pattern here, or any of the patterns from Dutchy, he states it, and I tested it, and it is true. Make sure that when you're printing, you disable your print to fit feature and print these things at 100%. Otherwise, any template that is here in the patterns is not going to be the correct size, and you're going to end up with wasted time and wasted lumber. So I have a few little cheats here. I do actually have on this older ruler here a metric scale, and I also have one of my favorite tools in the shop as far as electronics go. I have my calculator, which will very easily convert metric to imperial and vice versa for me. So the very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to start on the base. Now guys, in any pattern in this set of plans that is just a simple block, I'm not going to go through explanations of how to cut a block of wood. Case in point, this piece right here. It's a simple block with a hole in the middle. I don't think we need instruction on that. But I will instruct on things like this piece. And this piece here has some different cuts in it. And let's get into this. So the first thing I've done with the base is I've cut a block, which will be our base stock. And I've used the dimensions here on the print to cut this block. What we're going to start with here on this one is this taper right here. And I've measured that taper to be 20 degrees off of the base. So it's going to start 8 millimeters in from the front edge. So all we're going to do is tilt our table saw blade to 20 degrees, and using our miter fence, we're going to cut this end here off of our main block. We're not going to worry about this hole at first because this is actually an angled hole. We're going to deal with that after. But what we are going to do is we're going to scale off the drawing, mark these holes, and drill them to their depth, which we can see on this page over here. Don't forget that with a lot of these plans on the Toys and Joys, a lot of stuff is on the one main drawing and you have to cross-reference. It's no different in Dutchy's plans. You may not get all the information that you need right here, but if you compare it to other drawings around, you can get the information you need. It's called details, and that's where you get it. This would be kind of a detailed drawing of that hole, which is right here. So be sure before you get frustrated with it that you look at the whole picture, not just the one view. So once we get these holes drilled, we're going to concentrate on these notches here. And the first thing that we want to do is I want to cut this shoulder. So we're going to raise the blade to the height of this shoulder, mark it on our block, and then cross cut it at the table saw. Once we get that done, we can mark our straight lines here. And guys, it doesn't have to be super perfect or super technical. You can do this at the table saw if you want, raising your blade this 52 millimeters and cross cutting it to take that piece out. Or you can just take it over to the scroll saw or band saw and cut carefully along the line until you meet with that shoulder that you created and get that notch taken out of there. Okay, so at this point, we're going to move on to all of these holes that are drilled in the bottom. And again, I don't think we need a video of that. We're just going to scale off of the drawing. We can get our depth from this drawing right here. We can get our dimensions of where the hole centers are going. It's a 4 millimeter hole. I don't have metric drill bits, so this will be a 5/32 diameter dowel. And Dutchy has very conveniently provided the drawn hole size and the imperial equivalent to the drill bit if you don't have the metric ones. So that's appreciated. So I'm going to get these holes drilled, and then we're going to move on to this little, well, this angled hole here, which I believe will be for the steering wheel shaft. First thing that I have done is I've scaled off the drawing using the dimensions here, 29 millimeters and 29 millimeters, and I have center punched the center of our hole. Don't forget, guys, that this 29 millimeters is not from the edge of your taper that you cut. That 29 millimeters is from your original straight edge at the very edge of your piece. So 29 millimeters back. So if you don't know what size hole it is, because it's not listed right here, as I said earlier, guys, there's always another way to find the dimensions. So over here we have a diameter of 4 millimeters, but here is our hole, and if we look right here, there is the width of it at 6 millimeters. So in my case, that is a 1/4 inch diameter hole. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to go over to the drill press, and we need to get this at a 20-degree angle. Now guys, this is quite possibly the simplest way ever to drill an angled hole. And all I've done is I've used my tilt box. You don't have to use this. You can use a protractor if you like. And I've angled this so that it is at 20 degrees. And I've set my fence so that the bit will strike in the center where I've marked. And I've clamped it to the fence at 20 degrees with a little support block here underneath, just in case something slips. And we're just going to slowly and carefully drill down through. You want to be careful doing this with smaller or thinner bits because deflection can be a problem, but with a 1/4 inch it shouldn't be too bad once you get it started. You just really need to go slow on that first entry into the wood. And there we go. Now guys, let me just point something out to you. For starters, I drew a light line here so that I know I'm drilling at the right angle. It's very easy to get turned around and not realize that you're drilling on the wrong face. So that little line will help. Don't be afraid to mark your project a little bit in order to help you keep things aligned. The other thing that I would like to point out is that if you don't have a tilt box or a way to mark this at 20 degrees, this hole, if we look here on our prints, it runs directly parallel to this angled surface that we already cut here at the table saw. So this is already at 20 degrees. So you can use a square on your drill press table, tilt your piece until your square is flush there with that 20-degree cut, and clamp it to your fence, and you'll still get your 20-degree angled hole. Well, the drawings show this recess right here, which we can see right here. We can see it again over here. But make this recess after assembling. So I'm going to leave that. I'm going to take Dutchy's word for it. I'm not going to cut that for now, but we are going to cut this recess right over here. So what we're going to do is we can see the dimensions here, 14 millimeters back, and here is the dimensions on how far in it is from the edge, how wide it is. We're going to mark this out onto our blank. And once we get it marked, guys, this is all handwork as far as I'm concerned. You could do it on a table saw, but for the amount of chiseling that there is to get this out of there, I think it'll be a much safer and a much better process to hand chisel it. So that's what we're going to do. Well, I'm sure that most of you know this, but we're just going to go through the process that I'm going to use in order to take this little bevel out of here. Well, for starters, I have it all marked out on all planes. This front plane here, I have the back of our taper where it starts, and I have our shoulders. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use this little gent saw here, just because it's the least aggressive saw, and I'm going to very carefully cut along this line of the shoulder, stopping the blade when it gets here to this line in the front and here to this line at the back. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. Now guys, holding your finger along the spine of your gent saw will help you with control, and as well, using your thumb against the edge of your stock and running the side of your blade along your thumb will also help you with control and alignment. All right, so we'll turn this around, and all I'm going to do now is, starting right at that mark, we're just going to gently shave this off here. We don't want to take a lot of material, so just a gentle shaving, just like that. And we're going to carry on until we get the full taper. Now guys, please, 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 do not push this towards you, this chisel. As well, do not have your hands over here holding things. It's a good way to get a trip to the ER for some stitches. So we're just going to carry on and get this carved out, and I'll show you what I end up with once I get it finished. Guys, one of the most useful things that you can use in a model build is a piece of 3/4 inch MDF with sandpaper attached. In my case, I use spray adhesive to adhere the sandpaper down, and I use 180 grit. When the sandpaper gets worn out, you can use a heat gun to remove the sandpaper and then just glue another piece down. So once you have your paper all set on your MDF, we can give our piece a good sanding, being careful not to lose its shape, its size, or to round any of the edges. And that would be our base completed. Now, with the exception of this one notch that they show, but we're going to cut that one later. But this base is done. We can put it off to the side, and we're going to turn our attention to the rear axle. Now, the rear axle spans over several pages, and there are some pieces here, guys, that just don't need any explanation. We have a block with a hole in it. It's fairly simple. We have dowels that are cut to a specific length, and they're all listed on the plans. No need to explain it. These pieces right here, we have this section right here, and we also have this kind of little cam right here. These are very simple cuts, and what we're going to do for this is I'm going to take the patterns, I'm going to apply spray adhesive on the back. First, I'm going to apply masking tape to my stock, and very simply, I'm going to cut these out over at the scroll saw after I drill my holes. Rule of thumb is that in most cases, you drill your holes first. Once I get that finished up, then we're going to move on to this piece right here. So one thing I would like to point out about these two pieces, and that is this radius of 9 millimeters here in the middle. And while Dutchy has been nice enough to give us a chart showing you the difference in sizes between imperial drill bits and metric, There is no listing for a 9mm. It says 6/8 and then jumps right to 30. So I'm going to tell you a 9mm bit is the equivalent of a 23/64 bit for those of you out there who are working in Imperial. That's about the closest you're going to come to that 9mm. Anyway, what we're going to do now is we're going to turn our attention to this part 2B here. And I have some stock, some walnut that I've cut, and I've cut it to be 18 by 18, and it is much, much longer than what we ever need for this or these pieces. And that's because the majority of the work here is going to be at the table saw, and better to work with a longer length and cut it down than what it ever is to work with a short length and risk your fingers kind of thing. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to work on this chamfer here that we can see, and the chamfer measures in 3mm. So I have placed a mark here at the end of our board at 3mm in from the end. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my miter fence at 45 degrees. I'm going to set my stop block so that the blade strikes right at that 3mm mark, and I will be able to cut the chamfers on both ends of this by only setting my saw once. I can just cut one cut, rotate it 90 degrees, cut 90 degrees, cut 90 degrees, cut, and then I flip the whole thing 180 and I repeat the process on the opposite side. And there we can see our chamfers, and that is on both sides. Now, prior to cutting the chamfers, you can see there that I marked for our holes in the end of these pieces. Now, I would just like to point out, make sure you pay attention here. While the hole is centered on one plane, on the opposite side, you'll see here there is an 8mm with exclamation marks. That is to bring it to your attention that it is not a centered hole. So pay attention to that. With those holes marked, we're now going to cut these to their length of 50mm long. Now we need to make a left and a right of these, which means that they are going to be completely opposite. While you're doing these pieces and you need to do the left and the right, ensure that you keep them in their left and right positions at all times. Don't deviate from them. Don't suddenly put this one on a different plane, flipping at 90 degrees. Always keep it the exact same way. And the best way here that we're going to see to do that is if we first off drill these holes in the end. So on the plans here, we can see that that is an 8mm hole or a 5/16 diameter. I'm going to do mine just a little different because these are not through holes. I like to do things just a little off here. So I'm actually going to make those a 1/4" diameter hole, and they will be 30mm deep. So let's get those two holes drilled. Well, there are our two kind of off-center holes drilled, and we now need to put them in the orientation of left and right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take them and lay them on their sides like this. We can see that the hole is off center away from me, which coincides with this drawing right here. So what I'm going to do now is this 10mm deep hole that is 6mm in from the end, that one there, we are going to drill that next. That will be a 5mm diameter hole, or 3/16 in my case. And we will just make sure that we're drilling them on the inside edges here of each of our piece to keep our left and our right together so that we know the orientation. And the last thing to do will be to drill this 5mm diameter hole 7mm in from the end with our tapers right here and in the center of our 18mm side. And that hole will just protrude into our axle hole that we drilled into the end grain. So I'm going to get that one drilled, and then all that's left to do is measure out and cut these two chamfers here on the ends. And guys, I'm going to say this. This is a small piece, little less than 2 inches, I believe. Just slightly less than 2 inches. If you're going to use your table saw, that's fine, but clamp this to your fence. Don't put your fingers in there. A better option here would be a miter box with a fine tooth crosscut saw. So either way, let's get these miters cut and get that last hole drilled. And then I just want to point out how this relates to the drawing. And there we go, a left and a right, completely opposite of each other. Guys, let me just show you here how you can check this. These drawings are not placed here just willy-nilly. They're not just there for the heck of it. So if I flip this over, I can see here now that there is our chamfers that line up with this top view, and there is our hole that lines up with this top view. On the end, if I tip this up, there's the end view, and you can see that this hole is closer to this edge, just like it is here, closer to this edge. So we'll put this back down here, and we will roll it 90 degrees. And now we have this plane. There is our hole here drilled into the side. We can see it right here by 10 millimeters. We have our hole here. You can see it lines up. It's closer to this front edge. And on this side, there's our hole. And then if we take it, we roll it 90 degrees once again, there we have our 3/16 hole, which buries itself right in the middle of this hole here. And this dotted line denotes a hole on the inside. And of course it is, because it's not a through hole. So there you go. There is a very quick and easy way to check to make sure that all your planes are the right way and that it is the way it should be. And if you have the two of these together and you rotate them, you'll see that they are exactly opposite each other. So we have our left and our right. Now guys, with all your parts made and all of your dowels cut according to the plans, you can then use the assembly view to put this rear axle together. Guys, be very careful. Pay attention here to where there is no glue and where there is glue, because there are moving parts in here. Also, very importantly, make sure you clean up your squeeze out so that you don't have squeeze out gluing parts together that should not be glued together. And when it's all glued together, you end up with the rear axle like this, and you can see there the steering of the back, just like the forklift would have. That's quite an ingenious way of doing it. I really like that. That's kind of neat. All right, so we've got the steering working. It works smooth. Guys, one thing you want to do is make a lot of dry fits of this. Make sure that you're sanding the dowels ever so slightly, just tweaking them to get a snug fit, but enough that this will move freely and allow you to steer. So now that we have this done, we can glue our rear axle onto our body. And this little nub here, this actually goes on the bottom of our forklift. So we can just glue this on here just like this and clamp it up and let it dry. And unfortunately, that's about all the time that we have for this week. Guys, while it doesn't look like we've got much done over the time during this show, this has been done over a couple days in between projects, and I'm going to estimate that so far I've got about 10 hours in on this, and that is just on the body and that rear axle steering mechanism. Now you really want to make sure, as I said, do dry fits and sand to make things snug but not too tight. You want that rear mechanism freely moving, and you're going to see why later on in the build. Either way, this has been a lot of fun so far, and I hope that you're going to join along with me and make your own version of this. Now, speaking of which, guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the link down below to Dutchy Patterns website and check it out. Check out his patterns and that sort of thing. They are a digital download for purchase there on his website. If you are interested in any of those or want to follow along here, you can find them all on that website. He's got some really great patterns, so head over there and check it out. Guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in this week. If you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. You click that bell and then you're not going to miss the notifications of future episodes of the program. Once again, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed today's content. I hope you're going to check out Dutchy's site and get a set of these plans for yourself and build along with me. And more importantly, I hope you're going to join me again next week when I bring you yet another Alternative Tuesdays.